Yo, what's good? It's your boy Mixtape Moth, and today I'm going to hit y'all with a review of the new Skyzoo album entitled All the Brilliant Things. Let's get to it. Alright, so Skyzoo is an underrated but well-respected MC coming out of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Now, he's a very thoughtful and clever lyricist who has a history of putting out conceptually themed projects. His last release, Milestones, which dropped in 2020, focused entirely on the theme of fatherhood. But one of my favorite recent projects from Skyzoo would have to be his 2019 album Retropolitan that was produced entirely by Pete Rock. However, this new body of work, All the Brilliant Things, is Skyzoo's 7th studio album and his first release of 2021. It's a conceptual project that focuses largely on gentrification and how that has impacted his old neighborhood of Brooklyn in a negative way. While a lot of cities across the US have experienced gentrification to some extent in the past 10 to 15 years, it has been Skyzoo's hometown of Brooklyn that has been the hardest hit and has undergone the most significant and dramatic change. And when I last visited Brooklyn in 2019, I saw firsthand how different certain parts of the borough had looked, especially in a section of Flatbush, Bushwick, and downtown Brooklyn. Now, fortunately, I had the privilege of visiting the old Brooklyn and the old New York back in the mid-90s, late 90s, and all the way into the early 2000s. I even went to Beat Street Records on Fulton Street, which is like one of the meccas if you're a hip-hop head. Sadly, that store has been closed for a good number of years now. But back to this project, All the Brilliant Things. It contains 14 tracks and lasts approximately 56 minutes. When looking at the cover art, it shows a father and son looking at a new condo that has just been built in their neighborhood. And this symbolizes the displacement of black and brown people at the hands of this capitalist system. But with that being said, let me just jump right into a track-by-track breakdown. The opener, Free Jewelry, has some dope sample-based production. This sample is from Gap Maggioni's Diana and the Autumn Wind, which most have likely heard used by Dilla and Madlib. Skyzoo raps, "My whole catalog is like I'm shooting a Spike Lee joint." And I can't think of a more accurate way to describe Skyzoo's music, as he's like the Spike Lee of hip-hop. Interestingly enough, they both hail from the same neighborhood in Brooklyn. He has a few interesting lines addressing the culture vultures. "So don't mistake me, yo, I don't do this for Complex, nor a Pitchfork, or any other facade where the culture is determined while chugging a PBR and telling you how to represent all of the shit that you made while they move in your building with their roommate." All in all, this was a dope way to open up the project as I dug the production and the sharp lyricism. Track 2 is St. James Liquors, which features a hook from Aria. Now, this same hook is later repeated throughout the album that kind of gives it some consistency and also a To Pimp a Butterfly kind of feel. This has an energetic boom bap beat with the sax on the back end. On this record, Skyzoo reminisces back to the times he was posted on the stoop with his crew and when he first learned to rhyme at the age of 9. He also raps about being inspired by the late great Biggie, who grew up just a block away. Skyzoo recalls seeing Biggie push the black Lexus and rolling with his homie D-Rock. Overall, this is a record that just oozes with that 90s rap nostalgia. Track 3 is a tour of Brooklyn. Now, Skyzoo gives the listener a brief tour of his old stomping grounds of BK before gentrification. This is set to a jazzy boom bap beat with some gorgeous keys. Skyzoo raps, "Know your block live when out-of-towners want to rep where you live." And I know that was the case for me as a teenager. I'm not even going to front, as I recall thinking that being from Brooklyn would be like the greatest thing ever. We then get a hook from Al Scratch at the end of the track. I believe he makes an appearance, but perhaps it's just his vocals that are sampled in. But either way, I think it was a good look that Skyzoo added this portion to the track, especially since LL Scratch was a Brooklyn duo from the 90s and that single was very popular. Right after is Rich Rhetoric. We're getting a very 90s inspired instrumental with bells and a funky tempo. On this record, Skyzoo credits all his success to the Curb, so all the fly talk and all the rich rhetoric that's embedded in his music comes from what he learned on the corner. You know, the OGs taught him to keep it richer. There's a sax layer here that I've noticed is used throughout on the album, and I kind of wished he would have switched up this sax melody somewhat. as I feel it's literally the same one used throughout, or at least it sounded that way to me. Skyzoo had a line referencing both the rapper AZ and the Harlem drug kingpin AZ Faison that I thought was clever, although he might have done this before on another album, I'm not really sure. What follows is Bodega Flowers, which interpolates a portion of Roy Ayers' We Live in Brooklyn, baby. Instrumentally, this one is mellow and smooth with gentle vocals from BJ the Chicago Kid. It has a real grown and classy kind of vibe. While it's technically good, it's probably not a song that I'm gonna feel the urge to go back to a lot, but I did appreciate the theme of, giving people their flowers while they're still here. And of course the Spike Lee skit used fit really well with this theme. Track 6 is the soulful Something to Believe In featuring Raheem Devine. This has another Roy Ayers sample, but it's his most well known with Everybody Loves the Sunshine. There's also the sax added. Even though there is somewhat of a spiritual focus to this record, it's still very bar heavy. Some lines that stood out were, "We're a product of Ziplocs, they're a product of TikToks." Also, "Part of me is Mos Def, part of me is Mace, so my jewelry be on, but my aura reeks of sage." And this is what I feel makes Skyzoo a cool cat. He's not just one way. He's fly, but also conscious. It's all about maintaining that balance. Then on Humble Brag, Skyzoo bigs up himself in the classiest way possible. This is set to a smooth boom bap beat with horns and a pleasant vocal harmony. He also begins to slowly introduce the concept of gentrifying, especially with a line like, "Praise due to the smaller apartments and running to stay up in them regardless." Now, track 8, "I Was Supposed to Be a Trap Rapper," is a real highlight. This samples from Bob James's classic Nautilus. Some may also remember this same sample used for Mary J. Blige's Sincerity, which featured Nas and DMX. That was a really great rap R&B mashup in the late 90s. This track finds Skyzoo reflecting back to when he did trap-like activities while listening to some boom bap. For instance, he raps, "Trying to flood Fulton Street with Dilla beats, and I bet I did all of the above to a soliloquy, made trappers go nuts to donuts." He also talks about playing Ninth Wonder beats when in the presence of strippers. That I found to be a little amusing. A couple other dope lines are, "My tug of war was LB and LOX, turned into a hybrid and found a way to kill. Whole hood thought I was wild for turning down a major deal." Then at the end of the track, the beat switches to a trap instrumental and Skyzoo gives us some bars showing his versatility. I thought this was a dope song overall. Actually, one of my favorites from the project. Track 9 is Plugs and Connections, set to a dreamy jazz soundscape. Skyzoo talks about the various plugs he has encountered, whether being the dudes on the corner that he saw growing up or the wealthy white businessmen and developers who buy up property in the hood and displace black folk. He mentions his dad selling their brownstone to a 34-year-old, but his dad ended up making out since he now lives in Atlanta. The following track, The Scrimmage, finds Skyzoo attempting to navigate through this new Brooklyn. The mindset he has is a practical one. Y'all don't be in my way, I won't be in yours. Despite the crime and poverty that exists in his old neighborhood, he misses it as it was a place that he called home. The subsequent track is Culture-ish. This is a smooth and thought-provoking record, I feel, in terms of the production and lyrics. It's a standout song. On here, Skyzoo examines cultural appropriation and how that has been abused, especially on lines like, "And they just want to be positioned where you've been," sort of like how they turned living single into friends. That was deep, as I never made that connection between living single and friends before. But despite all the cultural thievery that exists, Skyzoo remains determined to carry on for the culture and hand down the baton to those who are worthy. Track 12 is Bed-Stuy is Burning. It's another great record that was actually the album's first single. This contains some live jazz band production courtesy of the Hypnotic Brass Ensemble. This is one of the most poignant songs on the album, in my opinion, as he speaks on the gentrification theme in much greater detail. Skyzoo passionately urges black folks in cities across the U.S. to not allow the same level of gentrification that occurred in New York to happen to them. I like the very funky jazz production and the heartfelt urgency to his message. It's just a powerful song. The second to last track is What Money Taught Us. The theme here is pretty self-explanatory, as we are all products of this capitalist system where cash rules everything around us. But Skyzoo makes it very clear that he will still take the bag. But the difference is he won't let them sell him on how to act in the process. This has a piano loop and a vocal harmony. It's a decent track, but I can't say I was blown away by it. Then the album wraps up with Soft Eyes. We are getting a polished instrumental with a sax and an attractive vocal sample. There's also some soulful crooning performed by Black Soul on the hook. He hints at the idea of retiring, but thankfully decides against it. It's a decent enough closing track, but I can't say it's as strong as some of the other songs on the early part of the album. Overall, I'm giving this album a rating of 4 mics. While sonically, I prefer some of his other projects like Retropolitan, Live from the Tape Deck, and The Salvation a little more than this. I'm still giving it 4 mics due to the strong level of lyricism and the album's cohesiveness. Also, the conceptual theme was executed really well. And while Skyzoo has touched upon gentrification before, he really delved into it deeply, making much more of an impactful statement here. As a whole, there was a really smooth, mature, and grown man feel to the production, which I can definitely respect, but at times I was hoping for a few beats that were a little grittier, a little dustier, and a little punchier, kind of like what we got on Retropolitan and Live from the Tape Deck. Now look, I understand this was a different project, but I kind of wish that some of the jazzier beats could have been a little edgier. This is just my personal take, but I feel this was still a very strong and thought-provoking project that will hopefully spark some more awareness and conversation into important issues like gentrification and cultural appropriation. My favorite tracks include Free Jewelry, St. James Liquor, A Tour of the Neighborhood, I Was Supposed to Be a Trap Rapper, Culture-ish, and Bed-Stuy is Burning. Let me know what you thought about this project in the comment section below. It's your boy Mixtape Moth. I'm signing out, but be sure to hit that like button and please subscribe. As always, it's peace and blessing. Skyzoo, all the brilliant things. One.